BionicDance is filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Now, I want to preface this video by saying that this video is not about whether an atheist can be moral or not, or do a good thing or a kind thing. That's not what this video is about. It's about taking this view of the world, a material view where you and I are merely material, and following it to its conclusion.
Following it to your conclusion, a conclusion which fails on myriad levels, largely because of inconsistency in representation and logic. Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. Morality is such a sticky topic. It seems that a lot of people, even otherwise rational atheists, simply cannot accept that morality is not objective, even going so far as to find some twisted logic that allows the word objective to be used in some manner of its description, regardless of whether what they're describing actually fits a definition of objective morality. It's sad, really.
Now, in the Bible's view of man, we are body, soul, and spirit. We're more than material. Okay? But in this material view, we're merely a body. We're merely material. And all of our decisions based on morality, all of our behaviors, are purely based upon a brain that is merely chemicals, and therefore completely and 100% subservient to the laws of nature, chemistry, physics, etc.
And there is absolutely no evidence suggesting otherwise, short of our own feelings and preconceptions anyway, which are, by definition, subjective. Just because something seems one way doesn't mean that it's not actually another, and if it cannot stand up against critical examination, it must be treated as suspect at best.
And that brain, of course, was mapped out, or the blueprint of our brain is our DNA. And so we are purely programmed ahead of time by our DNA. And we're continually being reprogrammed by environmental factors. And these two lines of code or programming intersect together at the present moment, and you're doing what you're doing right now. So you are a material robot.
And again, that's to what all the evidence points. There is no reason to suspect otherwise, except that it's rather unflattering. And our personal perception seems to be otherwise, but why can our perceptions not also be part of that environmental program?
And what's the implication of having no freedom of will? Well, technically, we can't take responsibility for our actions, or it wouldn't be right to do so, because, I have the gene.
And this is where the inconsistency comes in. The implication seems to be that we'd be using our lack of free will as an excuse to be an asshole. Like someone could say, oh sure, I stole those cars and murder-raped all those toddlers, but you can't blame me, I'm just genetically programmed that way. But this implies a certain amount of free will, doesn't it? It assumes that whether people blame someone or not is under their control, that it isn't also part of their genetic code. Genetics are all about survival, about perpetuation of one's species, of one's genes. Blaming others for interrupting that process would obviously be part of that built-in code, or one's genetic line would end awfully quickly. That's evolution by natural selection right there in a nutshell. And there is no free will required, nor is being genetically programmed to be harmful a get-out-of-jail-free card.
So this atheist, materialist mindset has crept into our culture, and that's why I say it does a disservice to humanity, because we know that's not what's true. We know that's what's not real.
Spoiler alert, he says this a lot throughout the entire video, but not once does he provide any evidence of it being so. He just says we know it, as if it's a foregone conclusion, as if he doesn't have to prove it. And it sounds more like he's trying to convince himself than he is anybody else.
That's another implication of this view of the world, is really it's inconsistent of us if we hold this view of the world and yet make moral judgments on others. And yet we see atheist, materialist people doing this all the time. How can you make a moral judgment on anybody if they had no other choice in the matter to do what they did?
And again, this assumes that making moral judgments is something that cannot be done without free will, as if making the judgment isn't part of that in which we have no choice. Why must judgments be made only as an act of free will? Okay, it might be more accurate to call those judgments reactions when there's no free will, but the point stands. Reacting to the behavior of others would clearly be part of a species which has been genetically programmed to survive.
I mean, with Hitler, All you can say
is that Hitler doesn't really need to be used as an example. If you want to hear this guy's descent into Godwin's law, then, as always, there'll be a link to his video in the description. But my argument will still be the same. Other people's survival instinct was in conflict with Hitler's alpha dog need for genetic superiority, and thus judgments were made on both sides of the conflict. No free will required. Incidentally, before World War II, who was the go-to standard for evilest person ever? If Hitler had never risen to power, to whom would Godwin's law refer instead? Just curious.
in this case, one cannot make an objective case for putting a baby into a wood stove as opposed to a piece of wood, because both of them are just chemicals, and why are some chemicals more valuable than other chemicals? You can't make an objective case for that.
And value is, by definition, a subjective measurement. Money is worth less than a life preserver to the man stranded at sea, where money is worth more to the fellow in the big city penthouse. It doesn't matter how much you think kids are awesome. They're only worth what they're worth to you, and other people might not agree. You cannot make an objective judgment. The argument here seems to be that subjective morality isn't happy, fun, therefore morality has to be objective, and that's simply not how the difference between objective and subjective works.
Sam Harris, who also says morality is purely biological, says that whatever is beneficial to a society, whatever makes it flourish, is what's right and what's good. Well, what if that society is ISIS, and they happen to take over the whole world, and they flourish, and everybody else falters? Well, I guess they were right.
Right compared to what? Don't you think they'd be grumpy if we won and got our way? Don't you think they'd be making exactly the same argument about everyone else's morality? They're just as convinced as the rest of us that they know better. Who are we to tell them we're right and they're wrong? At most, all one side in the morality debate can say to any other is what they prefer. Never has there been a way to show what is right or wrong, because such does not exist. Opinion is all there is. Morality is subjective.
We know that we are more than material. We don't experience that view of the world. We experience a biblical view of the world.
No, we don't. It might feel that way, but every scrap of experimentation points to our existence being purely biological, neurological, brain-based. Now, if you're going to trust your subjective experience over objective study, unwilling to accept that your perceptions and preconceptions may well be faulty, then I don't think there's a conversation to be had. At least, not with you. Fortunately, my audience is wider than just one person. If I cannot change your mind, perhaps I can reach someone else's.
We experience that we have a freedom of will. It's not an illusion, like some of these people, like Richard Dawkins, might say.
He says, not providing a scrap of evidence.
Free will is not an illusion. It's real, because the Bible is true.
This would be the same Bible that has witches, wizards, zombies, demons, unicorns, dragons, and a talking donkey, yes? That's what's true and our source of morality, is it?
The Bible says we're body, soul, and spirit. And when it comes to morality, Romans 2 says...
See, here's the problem. What the Bible says isn't particularly relevant except as a subjective expression of its author's opinions. And I'm not singling out the Bible. Every holy book makes moral claims, with the similar lack of factual verification. If any holy book is going to be touted as morally superior to any other, then its factuality must first be established, a feat which no religious text has ever managed, primarily due to the substitution of faith where evidence ought to be.
When it comes to the materialist view of the world as it relates to morality, we look at it and say, that's nonsense.
Telling me what I say? That's a paddlin'. Fact is, I'm going by what I see, not what I feel. And what I see is a universe that is governed entirely by itself, with no other forces necessary to produce the perceivable result. And that includes our methods, modes, and standards of behavior. No God required. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think. A thumbs up for this video is a vote for excellence and glory. Subscribe to BionicDance and make the internet great again.